Thanks, John. Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So we're going to actually go through this presentation, but again, it's going to be very interactive this morning, if that's okay. I think, is this a clicker? I'm going to assume that's the clicker. I'm going to try and use this clicker. I'm not good at using the clicker.
It's on there. When it goes green, it's on.
Okay. It's still not moving. Oh, I got it now. So here's some of the things that we're going to be going through today. And you heard a little bit from John. So, you know, leadership matters. Frontline leaders are a top priority. Developing leaders, what the research shows. We're going to be looking at a lot of research. And as I was going through the presentation, I was amazed at some of the statistics that I saw in there. It's incredible, worldwide, internationally. So we're going to be going through some of that. What, who, how. So as far as emerging leaders and growing them, we're going to be covering those areas. And then, of course, the leader of tomorrow. Before we get started, though, again, making this a very interactive session, the first question I would ask is, why are you here? So what are your objectives for this meeting? Anyone want to start? So it's kind of an important question. I mean, we've got, what, probably 150 people here. And you're here for a specific reason. No. Perfect.
I was going to say the leadership. Oh, thank you. Good morning. I'm interested in coming today because the topic isn't new, but the paradigm is changing in our world. And so with the pace of change and with all the things going on in the world, I think the question comes up in terms of what's required of tomorrow's leaders. So
right.
Looking for those new insights.
Right. Thank you.
I'm hopeful to find some ideas to identify folks that are considered the leaders or the high potentials in our organization, because that's really where we need to focus as far as moving people up in the organization.
I'm interested in learning not only about the succession planning, but workforce planning for the whole entire population of an organization, because as research keeps telling us that there's going to be a skill shortage and employers are going to be more responsible now for developing and training their own leadership internally.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm looking for, I have a group of folks that are in leadership positions that are really very passionate and great subject matter experts, but not able to inspire followership. And if there was a vote as to whether or not somebody would be on their team after being on their team for a while, I'm not sure they would survive that vote really well. And I'm looking to see how I can help them.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to explore the relationship between leadership development and talent management, particularly from a software perspective, and the data that is processed through that relationship.
Very good. Obviously, we're a software company, so we can help you with that. Anyone else? No? You know, I heard I work with a lot of companies, and one of the companies that I work with, VF Corporation, really always inspires me. They truly, I don't know if you guys are familiar with them, but they own North Face, they own Lee, they own Wrangler, they own probably 40 different brands. And I've been working with them for about 3 years. And from the first moment that I started working with them, they've got a CEO who's a tremendous leader. His name is Eric Wiseman. Some of you may be familiar with him, some not. When I started working with him, their stock was in the 60s. It's now over $118. Amazing what he's done, and it's all been about performance management and leadership and creating leaders, especially within that middle section, right? So that the gap that you have with you have frontline leaders, you have executives, and then you've got this middle management section, and he's just done a tremendous job. But one of the comments that he always makes to me, and you know, I know this is a famous quote that's been out there, but you know, the best leaders can implement the poorest of business plans, but the poorest of leaders can't implement the best of business plans. And that's always resonated with me because it's really about grooming leaders and being able to adapt to situations and being able to drive the company forward. So, with that, I have a good understanding now. Let me try this little clicker here. I've got a good understanding for why you're here. But then the next question I would ask is, what creates success in your organization? So, what are some of those key drivers? And I can tell you with Taleo, it's very clear. Our CEO drives it. And my folks from Taleo can tell you this. CEO drives it all the time. So, innovation, winning, execution. Innovation, winning, execution. But what are some of those drivers in your organization? So, and that's a question for you folks. And that's not my phone. Anyone? Ferris? There we go.
We have people, process, which is operational excellence, and customers.
Yeah. So your business drivers. And to those, you can attach specific metrics. Yeah. Anyone else?
Key drivers in our organization are our employees, the continuous development of our associates. Continuous improvement is a big focus for us right now, as well as our customers.
And who, let me ask you a question. Who drives that? So, I know we have all these messages, but who actually drives it?
The associates do, the employees do.
But is that a philosophy that's embraced?
From the top, our CEO from the
down.
top, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's embraced throughout the organization?
Yes.
Yeah. Because, every time I see my CEO, he asks about those 3 words. What's your mission? And we've got to come up with it. So innovation, execution, winning at all times. Okay. Anyone else? So some of the other drivers. So, and you've pretty much mentioned some of them. So, quality, integrity, engagement, definitely engagement, satisfaction, customers, retention. All of these are keywords and buzzwords with respect to the mission of an organization. So, why are these things so important? And, we're going to be talking about frontline leaders today. Frontline leaders are those individuals that are personal contributors that are the ones that can be groomed the most, are coachable. These are the folks that you want to bring into middle management. You want to create them as your leaders. Again, we call them frontline people. Okay. So here's where it gets pretty interesting, and you're going to say, so what's new, Valerie? So this is great. We know better leaders equal better engagement. So what do you got new for me here? What I have new for you are statistics, and what's really interesting here is DDI did a survey, and in the survey, what they found is that companies with higher engagement 4 times better than their competitors in that engagement. So you can see here. With lower leadership quality, only 9% of organizations actually did well or were engaged, whereas higher leadership quality, 50% of those organizations were engaged. Okay, so we're starting to get into some of these really cool statistics. The next one is basically on retention, right? So better leadership quality, better leaders equal better retention. Well, you know what, that's a no-brainer too. But you've got some really great statistics around here. So 24% of organizations with lower leadership quality, right? So they didn't have better retention, yet 70% of organizations with higher leadership quality had better retention. So, what does that mean? Well, I would kind of question these statistics on my own when you're looking at 70% of the organizations for retention, because I'd sit there and say, well, wait a minute. So if you have low turnover in an organization, what are those numbers based on, right? So if you look at, I don't know if anybody in here actually works for an insurance company. When you work for an insurance company, what you'll find is that people don't ever leave. They don't ever leave, right? You've got I used to work for an insurance company, and I remember giving out, I was an HR director, I remember giving out a service award for somebody who had worked at the company for 65 years. Dear God, how do you work for a company for 65 years? But I would question that from a retention perspective, because that same person, this woman, 65 years, was an administrative assistant. So where did she go with all of this? Nowhere. So she stayed with the company, but was not groomed to be a leader, and was 65 years in the same position. God bless her. And I got to tell you, the ring we got her was amazing. Yeah, 65 years was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. So anyway, question those numbers, but when you look at other organizations where they're really grooming their leaders, retention it's a big deal. You've got a good leader. I've got the best boss in the world. You've got a good leader. You're going to stay with the organization. Right? So, here's the bottom line. And you folks know this, but again, there's some statistics around this. Better leaders create better results in organizations, right? It increases revenue, increases profitability. You can see here some more numbers here. Low leadership quality, 13% of organizations. High leadership quality, 50% of organizations. In those 52% of organizations, they performed 3 times better, 5 times better than other leading organizations, simply because of leadership quality. Okay. Any questions on this? No, as we move through? Not compelling yet. It's going to get really compelling. Okay. Here's another one. Okay, so confidence, right? So you look at this and you say, okay, that's a great one. Better leaders are more confident individuals, and organizations become more confident. DDI has also studied this, and what they found is that if you're a more confident leader, your organization is going to do better. It's real simple. And the more confident you are, you're going to demonstrate behaviors that bring on confidence. That it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. But what we find is that organizations who are better confident are better performing organizations, and that's in your leadership. Okay. Okay. So, companies say they are finding that they don't have the managers to spearhead new projects or, step in for departing executives. The problem is companies try to shift into growth mode. We've got a bigger problem now. So the first issue that we had was actually grooming our leaders. The second issue now is how do we get them? Because right now there's going to be a really big skill gap, skill issue with bringing in new leaders. Okay. The other thing, too, is, forget about bringing in all these new leaders. We found that 18% of all companies actually are doing succession planning. That to me is just incredible, just absolutely incredible. And a lot of people that I meet are actually doing succession planning on spreadsheets and are doing it on Microsoft Word. And I sit there and I say, you would no sooner run your supply chain on a spreadsheet. You would use some sort of tool to get that done. How can you run your leaders on a spreadsheet? I also say that about compensation. How do you run your compensation, pay for performance, on a spreadsheet? 18% of companies are the only ones who are actually doing succession planning out there. It's amazing to me. Who, I should ask this question. Who in here is actually doing succession planning for your company? So, looking at the numbers, it's probably 25%. So that's pretty good. You guys need to get on it. Need to get on it. Okay. So, here's the, see if I can run all of these. Here's a gig on this. We've got baby boomers that are now exiting. We've got people in between that are coming in. I'm 46 years old. I won't admit to it. I just did in front of all of these people. But what we're finding right now, the age of workers, we're aging out. We're aging out right now. So your leaders, your 65 plus right now, are the ones that we're working with that are actually going to be aging out. Although what you'll find is that because of the economy and whatever, you're going to find that people will be working longer. But they are aging out. Then your 55 to 64-year-olds, your experienced leaders, your leadership prime, those are the ones that we're focusing on right now. They're going to be aging out. And then your 35 to 4-year-olds, here's the problem. If you look at the numbers, we did a study, and Bruce, who actually did the study for this one? Was that you?
We didn't do this.
You didn't do this one. Oh, here it is. HBR. HBR did the study. What they did was they actually did the study back in 2004. And what we did was we aged it out. So this was a study that took a look at the working population to say, how are our ages? How are we going to get these skills? How are we going to get these individuals to be working, within organizations? So they aged out and they said, you know what? This was based on what it would look like in 2010. This is now based on what it would look like in 2020. And here's what they found. So what they found here are the age of workers when it comes to capacity. So your 25 to 34-year-olds, there's going to be about a 15% amount of individuals that will actually be part of this workforce. But when we came into 45 to 54-year-olds, those are typically your leaders. We've got a major gap. So it's down to negative 10%. People are aging out. And then you can see 55 to 64, it's 21%, 65 to 74, 52% in 2020. Those are your people that are going to be retiring. So big gap here on being able to get people to work. Get this. The other point is that in addition to people aging out and not having the manpower to go after, we also can't tap into emerging markets. So, we had this big buzz about, we'll send people overseas, we'll bring people in from India, whatever it may be. Can't do that anymore because they're having their own issues with trying to fill the workforce as well. And one of the statistics, Bruce, that we had from China estimated that they would need 75,000 leaders, right, to tap into emerging markets and to do international business. 75,000 leaders. Right now, they only have 3,000 to 5,000. That's it. So for the next 10 years, how are they going to groom another, 65,000? So really a gap all over the place. So another survey. This one was kind of interesting too. So our new graduates, I've got a son who's getting ready to go into college very shortly. One of the things that was very interesting to me is in one of the studies, and this was done by McKinsey, so very reputable, they said only 13 of 100 are actually hireable right now coming out of college. Holy crow, why is that? Well, part of it is a lot of organizations don't want to spend the money to be able to train all these people. They're looking for individuals who are already skilled. They don't want to have to put that forward. You've got companies like IBM and whatever those companies may be, IBM, that will put these kids through programs. But for the most part, right now, only 13 of them are actually being hired out of college. It's really scary. Okay. So, what do we do to fill those gaps? Well, one of the first things we can do is we can fill a funnel. And we can say, okay, who are going to be those future execs? Let's fill that funnel from a recruiting perspective. Let's make sure we've got all the candidates that we can possibly have to fill that. But then we say, you know what? What's better is instead of just filling the funnel, let's go ahead and accelerate the development for individuals to fill that middle gap, the middle management, because this is really all about middle management. You've got your executives, but it's taking those frontline leaders and grooming them to be those middle managers. So this is actually a better picture of it. What we found, and this is coming from different studies, what's really interesting is this now, out of many companies that were surveyed, this now is the number one issue. So leadership development in organizations is the number one. So this came from the IC4P study, came from Hewitt, came from European executives. It also came from CHRO from IBM. So number one. I'm just going to open all of these up. What they found from these surveys, and I mean, look at these numbers. These are pretty big numbers. So from Deloitte, who did another survey, 71% of executives expect to increase the focus on developing high potential employees and emerging leaders. 64% of survey participants plan to increase their focus on accelerated leadership programs. And it goes on. 81% of companies, those are really big numbers. So there's really a tremendous focus now on leadership development. So, I would ask you folks then, do you think you're doing a good job preparing leaders? So 25% of you raised your hands and said we're doing succession planning, but there's other pieces. There's career development, of course, development planning. There's a recruiting effort to bring in the right people at the right time. How do you folks feel? How do you feel about the job you're doing to get these new leaders in? Anyone want to take a stab at that?
Having all the appropriate staff to do the recruiting on the front end to make sure you're getting the right person, we're not there.
Why do you think that is? When you say you're not there, why do you think that is?
I think probably more recently now than in the past, this has been given the importance within our organization. And it hadn't been there, but I think all the data, all the statistics you've just shown, our organization is looking at. We're a national company. We have the folks that are able to dedicate time to say, what's important, what are the trends, where are we going to be, and we've got to get out from being behind the 8 ball.
Yeah. So if you get hit by a bus tomorrow, who's going to take your spot? Yeah. Well, of course, I work for a talent management company. I know who's going to take my spot because there's somebody who's already filling my spot. But that's a really simple question. You would be amazed who gets hit by a bus, and how are you going to fill that? Especially if you've got an executive doing that job. So the one thing too, which is if anybody's been following Rupert Murdoch, right, and that whole big scam, his lieutenant in the UK has resigned, and the CEO of Dow Jones and Company has resigned. Who's running the companies? I don't know. Rupert Murdoch? But the two very, very successful organizations, who's running it? You just never know. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for that. I think you're up now.
Okay, yeah, I'm up. Okay, well, Gretchen said we're not doing very well. What I'm going to share with you is a little bit more data, and some of the data that Valerie shared with you comes from our biannual global leadership forecast. And DDI has been doing this now for over 10 years, and every 2 years we go out and survey the health of leadership. The data that's been presented so far, and I'm going to share with you, comes from over 12,000 leaders from 75 countries from over 2,000 organizations. So if you're looking for business case and health of leadership and leadership development, it's in the Global Leadership Forecast. Don't bother to write down all the stats. If you go out when you get a break, at the table outside, there is a copy of the Global Leadership Forecast. You can take all of the report with you. So saves you writing all of the stats down. But Gretchen, I hate to tell you, you were right. Okay, and here's what's pathetic. Okay, and I hate to use that word pathetic, but I'm going to use it. I'm probably going to use it more than once. Is when we did the survey in 2006, the leaders that responded to the Global Leadership Forecast then gave us a 33% approval rating on the efforts that we do to help them develop to become efficient and effective leaders. In 2009, it went down to 29%. I can understand that because a lot of organizations weren't buying paper clips. So why would we spend 50 cents on developing our leaders? And in 2011, we're back up to a staggering 34% approval rating. Okay, this is not very good. So those of you who are good, part of the message is how do we get better? Well, we need to think about what we need to develop our leaders in. We need to identify who needs to be developed. And then how are we going to develop them? And I'm going to talk a little bit about each three. If you came in expecting a cure to world hunger, can't help you. Okay? There's a lot we can talk about here. We'd need a lot more than a couple of hours to go through all of the things that potentially you could and should be doing. This is just thought-provoking starters to get you thinking about and sharing some of the best-in-class examples of what's happening in the world of leadership development. But when you think about your leaders and you think about your future leaders, what are some of the top predictors of leadership success? The boss. Say a bit more about that.
Who the manager is, who's taking care of the leader.
Who's taking care of the leader? Thank you, Abby. Okay, so it's more about the environment within which the individual is leading is a predictor of future success. So we could put that down somewhat around a culture and an environment. Okay, thanks. What else? Say a bit more about that.
If you don't have trust in your leader, if your leader isn't being ethical, they don't walk the talk, you're not going to have success.
Right. Thank you, Steve. So trust, again, ethical. Interesting when Valerie's talking about Rupert Murdoch and we're talking about trust. Okay. Yes.
Learning agility.
Learning agility. Say a bit more about that, Paddy. Right, so ability to learn. Okay, can you teach ability to learn? What do you think? Can I put somebody into the classroom for 4 days and teach them to learn? No, okay. That's somewhat between here. Okay, so it's kind of the hardwiring. They either have the ability to learn or the motivation to learn, or the last person who tried to teach me anything had a heart attack. I actually had that from the National Health Service in the UK. One of the reasons why I came to the States. A senior leader in the National Health Service actually said that on the first morning of our training. Okay, the last person tried to teach us anything had a heart attack. Okay, so learning ability. Yeah, there was another hand came up at this table, I believe. Okay, one more. Yes? Focus. Say a bit more about focus. Oh, I love it. Let's get married and have a relationship. Okay? If we can tie leadership development to the business, hello? Okay? Let's get away from the performance review which says, yeah, I meant to do something around personal development, but I was too busy. Okay? Or forget about the personal development, hit the numbers. Okay, so it's that focus, that 5-letter word. Okay, focus, which really does make a huge difference. We've talked about all of these things. I'm not going to dwell on them, but it's really a case of building the shopping list, as I like to think about it. Okay, ladies in the room, think about your significant others. How many of them are good shoppers? Okay, 1, 2. Okay, out of probably 60 or 70 ladies, have 2 significant others are good shoppers. Okay, I am the world's worst shopper. My wife will not let me out without a shopping list. Do not let your hiring managers or your leaders go out and think about development and succession without a shopping list. It's a formula for disaster. What does it look like? Well, this is just a sample success profile. It begins with what do people need to know. Then it needs to go to what are people done. And then it needs to go to what they can do. And most of this stuff has been around for a long time. But it's this bottom right-hand quadrant that people are now beginning to wake up and realize here's the difference between what makes people work and be successful and what may tee them up for failure. And it's that personal attributes or motivational traits. How many of you have seen organizations, probably not your current employer, but organizations take the best technician and make them the leader? Okay, how many of them are successful? Not many. How many of them really want to be leaders? Probably not many, because they're quite good at doing what they do. So the personal attributes component is really, really important. It's also important that when you get down to determining the competencies, for example, you go into enough detail. Here's my shopping story. We were having a dinner party. My wife called me up at the office and said, forgot to get the onions. Can you bring home onions? Message received and understood. I will obey. So I stopped off at the grocery store, remembered, got home. Hello, good day, how all that kind of stuff. Did you remember the onions? You stupid. You can fill in the blanks, ladies. Weren't you listening last night? I told you I'm doing this casserole and I wanted them this size. I'd arrive with NFL size onions. What's wrong? I've got onions. But they're not the right onions. And I had way too many of them. So it's really important when you think about competencies, for example, you get down to a level of granularity that people can relate to and understand. Because without that, again, you're going into the grocery store without the shopping list. It's also important that you connect the strategies for leadership development to the organizational goals. We do a lot of work, and John's going to talk later about executive assessment and coaching. But it's really important that you understand the context from a business perspective when it relates to leadership development. So, for example, oftentimes we get into conversations with clients, and I'm sure many of you in the room are saying the same kind of thing. We need to grow. Well, hello, most organizations need to grow. But are you going to grow organically? Are you going to grow domestically? Are you going to grow by going down to South America and need to find leaders who can go down to South America and set up a business? Because that puts a context into your leadership development activities. Also, it's hard when you start to think about the context within which the development's going to happen. This is another McKinsey study. And what it was looking at is what is required from a leadership perspective from the emerging economies and the developed economies. And they're not the same. Because the overwhelming leadership characteristic in the emerging economies is local influence. Now, I can think of another word that I might use to define local influence in certain economies and certain countries. But it's knowing how to get things done. But if you're thinking about appointing a leader in a developed country, then it's more around management proficiency, it's around communication skills, and it's around leadership skills. So again, think about how many of you in the room have got organizations that are international or global in perspective? Okay, yeah, Columbus isn't Columbia. Okay, and that's going to come into play when you start to think about leadership development. So we've talked a little bit about the what. Now let's talk for a few minutes about the who. Well, unfortunately, we don't have a stellar record of hiring people to be successful leaders. The good news is we do a slightly better job when we're promoting people internally. We only have a 28% failure rate. But again, only have a 28% failure rate. Why do you think it is that people coming in from outside the organization as a leader have a higher failure rate than internal? They don't understand the corporate culture. Thank you. What else? Yes? They don't know the business as well. What else? Yes, sir? When we're hiring, we don't have shopping lists. Okay, thank you, Gary. What else? Yes? Sorry? People already working for the organization don't know or trust them. Thank you for sharing that with me, because if you think about it, the impact, if we could improve our hiring processes by just 9%, the payoff would be extremely significant. I'm going to talk in a minute, but I want to share, give you a little bit more on this. But I want to share a story with you about how expensive hiring can be. Okay, those of you in the insurance business, cover your ears. This is an insurance company. It's not anywhere in the state of Ohio. Okay, so let me put that disclaimer out. Okay, but they had hired 16 executives, and they'd all failed. And I asked the SVP of HR, how expensive an issue is this? Without hesitation, she said $13 million. Recruiters' fees, signing on bonuses, relocations, golden parachutes. She had an Excel spreadsheet, Valerie. Sorry to say Excel spreadsheet, but she had an Excel, and it was all there, plain as day, $13 million. I said, what's the hidden cost? She said, I shudder to think. Engagement, morale, motivation, lack of trust. Okay, that was a very, very expensive mistake. Luckily, they'd realized that it had to stop. But that's the kind of cost that can be involved, particularly when you get higher up in the organization. What's interesting when you look at internal versus external is that internally promoted leaders get to full productivity 50% faster than people who are brought in from the outside, because they already know the culture. They know the products, they know the kind of way to get things done. That accelerates their growth and development. Not saying you can't or you don't have to go outside, because we're going to have to bring some people in. We just don't have enough. But if you can grow them internally, you'll get them to productivity quicker. Also, if you're bringing in people into the middle management ranks, the people that report to them stay away from work more often and leave more frequently. And again, that speaks to, I don't know them, I don't trust them. Okay, time for me to get out. Maybe there'll also be a fact, I didn't get the job, so it's time for me to update my resume. This is interesting. And this comes from an IBM study that rock stars hires rarely have the impact you expect. The analogy I use here is, if they're a star performer on the team, maybe they're the quarterback, okay, and they go to another team because it's free agency. If that team doesn't have a good wide receiver, okay, they're not going to get many touchdowns because somebody needs to be catching the ball. So again, from a rock star perspective, as the IBM study says, that just because they've been successful in one environment doesn't guarantee success in another environment unless you bring the whole team with them, or at least a couple of wide receivers. What's also interesting is this IBM data shows, ladies in the room, those of you who are rock stars, you have a better success rate when you switch organizations than men. There is no data that explains why that, but ladies in the room, you probably already know why that is the case. Okay, so lady rock stars, you have a higher rate of success. Okay, also, what's now happening, and part of the fact that this room is full, and Toronto was full, and Seattle was full, is social economic pressures are forcing us now to say we have to get serious about developing leaders. I was talking to an organization in Canada, this is 3 or 4 years ago now, and the SVP of HR said, we have to talk. I've just had to tell the CEO we're 60 leaders short and I've no idea where they're coming from. That's scary when you have to go into the CEO and say, forget the business plan, guys. Okay, we can't do it. We just don't have the leaders, and we have no idea where to find them. So we got the pressures. Okay, so enough of this. Let's come down to first-line leaders specifically for a few minutes. Another study we did, which we call Finding the First Rung, which we did last year, was specifically looking at first-line leaders and look about how they were assessed, how they were developed to be successful in that first leadership position. Just under 2,000 leaders were actually surveyed. Look at this. How did you become a leader? Just over 1 in 10 said, I was groomed to be a leader by a development program within my organization. That's the same percentage as there was no one else for the job. That is really, really scary. Oh, and then, by the way, okay, oftentimes what we do is we say, I was hired into the management position, given the position as a form of reward for my technical expertise. I'm the best software engineer, so I'm now the team leader. Okay, so I've lost that expertise, and now I'm a team leader, and I hate doing this, okay, because I'm not playing with bits and bytes anymore, okay. It's no longer fun. So now you have a disengaged leader who's probably disengaging his teammates, okay, all because there was no one else for the job. No surprise here, okay, only 6 out of 10 felt they were prepared for the job, and 42% found the transition to be easy. What is interesting about the transition is the data says, if you think about births, marriages, deaths, moving house, all of that kind of bad news stuff we deal with outside the world of work, this is more stressful. Going into a leadership position, unprepared, unaided, unsupported by the organization. It's no wonder that we don't have people saying, take me, I want to be a leader. Because we're just not giving them what they need or expect. We asked the same leaders an open-ended question. And we asked them to tell us what are the top 10 situations that they aren't ready for. Okay? Not rocket science. But if you're a software engineer or you're a sales representative and you're now being put into a sales leader role, how well prepared are you for any of those tasks? You're not. But what are we doing to help them be successful? What are we doing to build confidence and competence so that the next time they have to go on and have a conversation with somebody who is underperforming, they know what to do? Last year, DDI came up with a different approach to assessment. We call this approach Manager Ready, and it's really designed to take the assessment center approach and speed it up by using technology. So that basically for the price of a 360, you can get a full-blown assessment with over 900 different assessment points in 4 hours. And the idea is to help first-line leaders or aspiring first-line leaders understand where they may have gaps. What you're looking at is just a sample, and I'm sorry it's hard to read, but the colors stand out. Is here are all of the people who went through the assessment. And you can start to see at the top, as you look at just 5 of the 9 competencies that get assessed, the percentages that have it as strong or exceptional, the moderate, the limited, and the low. So you not only have individual data, you have group data. Okay. Another way of looking at this is it's kind of like a 9-box, but it's not a 9-box. Okay. Now, the top, trust me, for those of you in the back of the room, the top name on that list was a gentleman with the name of Chen. And here is Chen's assessment data. Okay. He's okay on managing relationships. He has strengths in guiding interactions, coaching for success, and influencing. He needs some work on coaching for improvement. The situation is that we have Chen, and he needs to lead an experienced, high-performing team. Would you put him in the job? Oh, Abby's going, yeah, maybe. Okay. A couple of you go, okay. What would you do to help him? You may want to start thinking about how we can get him some coaching around coaching for improvement. But at the moment, he doesn't need to be doing any coaching for improvement because the team's performing well. Now let's go to another scenario. What would you do now? Gretchen's saying, no way. Okay. This is a definite maybe. If you can give him the right kind of environment and coaching and development to support him, to make him feel confident and competent to go and deal with an underperformer. But to throw him in the deep end and say, by the way, can you swim? No, you don't want to do that. What about this one? Okay. Now we need Chen to lead a team in Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Asia. This is not enough data. What else do you need to know? Where's he from? He may be from, okay? His parents may have been in the forces. They were stationed in Germany and the UK while he was growing up, so he has some European experience. Exactly. Okay? Plus the fact you might want to ask him, do you want to leave Columbus and go over to London? Okay, now we need him to lead a team where morale is low, disengagement is high. What else might you want to know about Chen? Okay, Dana's saying something about his leadership attributes. Okay, that's the DNA, the hard coding, the wiring. Does he have that motivation and ability that's hardwired into Chen's brain? Okay, so yeah, the performance management system might give us data about his motivation. Okay, he may be a coach on a high school team. He may also be a motivational speaker. So there's data out there which would help us understand what Chen brings to the position. Okay, and then this is the last one, and I'll skip through this one pretty quickly. Okay, the point here, folks, is we need to have more data about the people that we have in our organizations. We don't know what we don't know. A lot of them are gems. You just don't know that they're hiding there, sitting behind a desk or in a cube, and we just haven't tapped that potential. Okay. So what we're really talking about here is Taleo talks about talent intelligence. And it's having all of that information in one place that you can easily access and easily find that enables you to make more informed decisions. Or for our insurance companies in the room, it's all about risk mitigation. How can I reduce the risk and feel confident that if I make a decision about Chen, I'm doing it in full light of all of the information and data about him and what he's going to need in order to help him grow and develop. Okay, so this is all of the stuff that you should be thinking about when you come to make an informed decision about an individual. Okay? If you don't know your people, how can you grow your business? And again, I hate to do this. It's like, the weather, it's wet outside, and it sounds pretty miserable. We're just not doing a good enough job. So when we talk about, and this was from a Taleo study, when you look at what we have in terms of data and what our organizations say is important to know about individuals, we have a lot of work to do. And in fact, the study said that less than 25% of organizations have access to the people, intelligence, and information they need. What makes it even more scary is we have it, but we don't share it with the line managers. But we're expecting them to make decisions. And those decisions, if you come back to my $13 million example, okay, those decisions can be extremely expensive. But if we expect them to rely on, well, I interviewed him for 15 minutes, I think he'll do. Okay, that just doesn't cut it at this day and age. There's just ways we can pull all this intelligence and data together. So let's talk about the how for a minute. How do you develop leaders to be successful? It's very simple. It's like time. And everybody knows that at midnight a new day starts. Well, it begins with we need to assess them, and there are multiple tools out there to assess strengths and growth areas. But not assessing is not acceptable. Once you know what their strengths and growth areas are, you need to think about how they can continue to apply and leverage the strengths they bring to the role. Why do you need to do that? If they're good at it, they probably enjoy it. That gets them out of bed in the morning while they're growing in areas they need to grow at. And then once you've taught them, you need to get them to apply it. And then you need to get them to apply it again. And then to apply it again. I can't remember the name of it. I'm going to have to look this up because I keep using this as an illustration. But there's a great motivational speaker who happens to be an MBA coach in the art of the free throw. And he presented at a DDI conference a good few years ago now. And during the 1 hour he was presenting to us, he made 268 baskets and he missed 2. And he told us which 2 he was going to miss because he varied his technique. And his advice to leaders and to those of you who are parents whose kids play sport is the biggest mistake we make is when they make the bucket, okay, now you move. His philosophy is when you've made it 25 times from the same place, then you move. And when you've made it 25 times from the same place, then you move. We have to take that same discipline when it comes to leadership development. So it's not just a case of put them in a room for 4 hours or sit them in front of a computer and they do some kind of web course, use it once, check the box. No, it's the equivalent of 25 times because it's the 25 times that will change the behavior. And then coming back to the comment we made earlier on, it's about the environment in terms of the support. They have to fail. But they have to feel like it's not a career-ending move when they say, hey, guess what, I made a mistake, or that meeting didn't go very well. So they have to have the right kind of support. And then when you've done it, you go back and do it all over again. That's what development's about. Now, when we were doing the Finding the First Rung survey, we asked our first-line leaders to tell us what their strengths and their growth areas were. And unfortunately, 89% have at least one blind spot. And that's a situation where you cannot rely solely on 360 kind of data because you're taking them into a role that they're not comfortable and familiar with. And that's why we came up with the approach to Manager Ready to help them go through the process of understanding exactly what strengths and growth areas they have. And now I'm going to turn it over to Valerie to talk about the management component.
So the other day, I was coming home from work, and my husband called me, and he said, we needed potatoes. Okay, so forget that joke. Okay. Although I love the onion. I love the onion thing. Those little pearl onions will get you every time. So this is a huge statistic. So 67% of all, employees out there say, you know what, my manager and I have not agreed to a specific written development plan. But I have to ask this question. Who in here has one? Not a lot. It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, I've got a development plan because I work for a talent management organization, but I can tell you that's the first development plan I've ever had. Every organization that I worked in, whether it was an insurance company, whatever type of organization it was, didn't have a development plan. And I'm looking in here, and I'm seeing probably only 10% of people have development plans. So kind of interesting there. So in these development plans, as you had heard before, there's a lot of pieces here. So it's the what, it's the how, it's the measurement, it's the results. Repeat it. So here's kind of an interesting picture. This comes from our talent management software, so succession planning, development planning, and the like. And what we're actually trying to do here is take all of those attributes for a development plan, as well as taking a look at the strengths of an individual and bring them together to be able to career develop them. So obviously, coming from a talent management organization, we're going to show you some of these pictures. But I think we did a really good job with it because we're not just looking at those specific attributes that make up an individual. We're taking those core leadership qualities and actually bringing them together to be able to measure these individuals and take a look at the results of these individuals to be able to groom them to be leaders. And you had talked a bit about this before. So this is interesting too. So I'm all alone. 56% of all employees say my manager has the knowledge and tools to support my development. Half. And Bruce was talking about it before, where you take technical individuals and you make them leaders in an organization because they're really good at their job, but you didn't do anything to groom them. This is where this comes from. 56%, my manager has the knowledge and tools to support my development. Less than 50%, I get sufficient feedback about my performance. Less than 50% again, my manager is committed to my development. I'll bet you only 10% of the individuals who are actually here today can say that their bosses actually support their development and want to see them succeed and move into bigger and brighter positions. But these numbers, less than half of all employees out there, it's pretty big stuff. So, you folks already know this, but it's really nice to get a reminder every once in a while. So what makes a really good leader or somebody who's a really good manager of an individual? Again, you already know this. A quick reminder: listen openly. Ask questions that lead to self-discovery. Discuss potential barriers and challenges. Help identify application opportunities. Offer support and encouragement. A lot of times we forget that, right? Because we've got business goals that we've got to meet out there. We're not looking at people goals. But this is stuff that is really key to be able to groom our leaders. Here's another one that's really interesting. Whoops. We found that if you train individuals for leadership, there is a tremendous ROI. So, how do you measure that? That's always been something very difficult to measure. But in here, what we found is that if you, up here, if you can see this, percent of managers who attended management development programs, 81 to 100% of individuals who attended these management development programs had an ROI of $134,121 to the company. That's a really big number. How did they measure that? Well, they probably looked at leadership programs, said what was profitability of the company, and they split it up. But the thing here is that's a huge amount of money for training individuals to make them the right leaders to bring a company to profitability. This one, I'm still trying to figure out whether this is Sanford & Son and what it is, but the old way was easy, right? So we got in a room, we had binders, we talked about leadership development and bringing people to the next step. Can't do it that way anymore. This now is a picture in, I don't want to muddle your head here, but this is a picture, and this is realistic, of an organization that we've been working with that actually put a development plan in place for their leaders. And this is what it came out to. So if you take a look at this, we won't go through each one, but if you take a look at this, it's not easy to develop leaders. You've got to have plans in place. So this one, core curriculum number 1, challenges of transitions, mastering EQ, influencing courage. Courage. It's a pretty good one. Core curriculum number 2, core curriculum number 3. And then you've got all these different pieces. This part is just to say that there's so many pieces to development of our leaders. And again, this is a true representative example of a plan that was put together by one of our customers. Okay. So, and Abby, I may call on you. So what are some of the ways that you are actually, developing leaders today?
We have some work to do for sure. But we have an emerging leaders program. Actually, the gal who created it is in this room too. And it targets specific frontline leaders. So there's workshops, mentoring, and different ways that we develop them.
How do you target them?
We look at performance ratings. We look at growth potential and mobility.
Okay.
For the big factors.
Very good. And then what does the training program look like?
It's gone through a lot of evolutions, but it's about a 2-year program now, and people are brought in and they go through these, various things, workshops and whatnot, and the idea is at the end they have, increased skills to be promoted, or that they are making multiple moves while they're in the program.
Do you guys do any assessments of individuals for personalities and?
Well, I'm new to taking it over, but there are the 360 piece, and there are other assessments, strengths finder and whatnot that they go through.
So I got to tell you guys a funny story. So another group that I work with, internal to Taleo, they're having this big, kind of development program next week. And they involved me kind of last minute, but they asked me to take the Herman International, whatever it is, assessment. Well, I had to do it on Friday night, and I got to tell you, I was flying home from New York. I had a couple of glasses of wine, so Lord knows what kind of leader I am. But I sit down and I do it. It was the funniest thing. So do you get sick while reading in a car? And do you like to cook? So by the end of this assessment, I'm sitting there going, okay, so I'm a really good cook who pukes in the cars, but I'm really rational when I do it. And so I'm really kind of interested to see how this is going to, all of these attributes. There was, 118 questions or something. Really interested to see how that's going to turn out. But it sounds like you folks are taking the right steps to really move in the right direction. Now, is there a lot of classroom training too?
There's about 7 workshops over the course of a couple of years, and then we also have our leadership and development curriculum, and they attend those as well.
Right.
But we're finding that the workshops are good. We just want to find ways to make them more, interactive, and that we're ensuring that they're doing that active learning outside of the workshops.
Right. Well, I was talking to the Department of Defense, Navy, on Friday, and I was amazed. I was talking to a vice president there, and I didn't realize that their leadership programs were so extensive there. But this woman was actually going on a 45-day training for career development. What do you do in 45? Of course, it's the Navy, and they take government money and stuff. But 45 days for that. It's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. Challenges with your program?
Well, I think a challenge has been where it has sat within the organization. It was in one specific business unit, and now it is in our talent management group. So, where the direction is coming from has been a challenge. I think also it was left for about 6 to 7 months of this year, and just kind of picking up the pieces and making sure. I know a lot of the folks have been disengaged now that nobody owned it for a while, so that was a big miss on our part. So just getting through that and making sure that these folks know that we're going to take care of them.
Yeah. And yet, these leadership programs too are hard. We're asked to do our jobs on a daily basis, and then we're asked to be a leader. It's kind of an interesting concept there, but there's a lot of work behind that, where if you're becoming a leader within an organization, you got a lot of stuff to do. I mean, it can be very taxing. Okay. Road closed.
Not to me.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that, by the way.
Okay, so as we think about how we develop our leaders and what kind of content we need to be bringing back to bear, the Global Leadership Forecast went out and asked leaders, what will the leader of the future need to look like? We also then compared, this was the list from the previous survey. And again, this is 2009, remember, okay? Probably no surprise that driving and managing change, because that business is the new normal. Change is the new normal, the way we do things. Execution, coaching and developing, it still blows me away. I've been in this business since 1984. We still don't coach and develop the way that we are supposed to. Making difficult decisions, and again, 2009, that's probably no surprise. And improving employee engagement, and again, no surprise. Now, let's think about 2011. 3 of those 5 made the cut for 2011. Which 3 do you think made the cut? Which 3 are still on the list? Change, developing others, and engagement, says Dana. What else? Anybody, any other thoughts? Okay. The order may not necessarily be the same. But the three that made the cut: change, developing, and execution. And I think now the kind of the engagement piece has realized that's an end result. We've kind of done everything else, but these are now the business priorities. There are two new ones. Anybody like to guess what they are? God, what a daring lot you are. Come on. Whew. Okay, talk about risk averse. Okay. No, seriously, anybody want to have a guess? Think about your own organizations. What have you been asked to do today? Yes? Develop and managing relationships. Thank you, Paddy. What else? Other suggestions? Yes? Flexibility and adaptability. Okay. I'll take one more guess. Critical thinking. Okay. And the top, or the second and third were, why you're here, identifying and developing future talent. Okay. We're now beginning to get buy-in and commitment that this is a problem. And so much so that it's now ranked second behind change. Finally, leaders are beginning to get it. This is not HR. We send them to HR to get fixed. We have to have some accountability and some ownership. And innovation and creativity. And this is not about, I'm a leader, I need to get more innovative. This is how do I create the right kind of environment that allows my team, the people I'm leading, the people who I work with, to come up, and it may be small I innovation. Or it may be huge I innovation if I'm running the R&D department. But these are the new topics that are the top 5 for leaders and leadership development. How many of you are actually offering development activities that speak to number 1? Okay, a couple of heads nodding. Okay, what about number 2? Okay, what about number 3? Okay, what about number 4? Coaching and developing. Okay, yeah, a few more hands are going up, but again, we have to think about not so much the course content. There's loads and loads of courses out there about coaching and developing. It's how do we create the environment, the application. How do we take and move from the old photograph that Valerie showed you to that thing that looked like wheels and cogs and everything else, and create an environment which allows people to learn. We use the phrase, the magic's in the mix. It's those ingredients. It's the onions, it's the potatoes, it's everything else that goes together to make the complete meal. That's where we have work to do. What about execution? How many of you are offering execution? Okay, few of you. Okay, this is where we need to go. Also, the organizations that we are being asked to develop leaders in are different. Okay, the traditional view is on the left. The more concurrent view is on the right. It's kind of a network. It's like a plate of spaghetti rather than the formalized reporting relationships. But actually, these are the same organizations. These are the reporting relationships. This is how things actually get done. And again, that's the application environment that we need to be thinking about when we talk about developing our leaders. So to summarize, where Valerie and I have taken you was we talked about how leadership is critical to business success. We talked about emerging leaders are the linchpin to optimizing talent and building capability and capacity within the organization. I feel like we've been a doctor giving you the bad news diagnosis, but yeah, the news isn't very good about how well we are doing in terms of developing leaders effectively. That we have to think about how we identify existing talent, how we build those shopping lists that determine what it takes to be a successful leader at whatever level in an organization. Development programs that cover a variety of modalities. The concurrent thinking is not around, I'm going to put you in a classroom for 45 days. That may work in the Navy. But the Gen Xers and the Gen Ys aren't going to sit in front of in a training room for 45 days and be fed, this is how to do it. So how we break it down into bite-sized chunks, it may be a 2-hour webinar followed by a brown bag lunch followed by something else, a podcast or a wiki something or other, or Twitter or a tweet or whatever they want to call those things. But it's, again, in the mix. And also stop thinking about July 19th, 2011, but start to think about July 19th, 2014, 2016. Because as leadership development, that's the mission that we've chosen to accept, is building those leaders for tomorrow and not just for today. We have a few minutes left. And you've heard me and Valerie, and we've had a few kind of like playing ping pong backwards and forwards to us. What I'd like to do, because there's a lot of talent in this room, there's a lot of experience. What I'd like to invite you to do, for about 5 to 7 minutes or so, think about those questions. Where are you struggling most? What are some of the best practices that you think you are applying in your own organizations? And let's get some networking going and some discussion. So in your table groups, let's talk for about 5 to 7 minutes about what are you struggling with and what are you doing well. And let's kind of get going, okay? And then we'll be taking a break. So off you go. Talk amongst yourselves. Yeah, you okay?